Next, we want to examine what impact does the change in the revenue growth at the top of the model has on the three key financial measures, which are the net income for 2030, as well as the total asset projection for that year and the long-term debt. Okay, we will perform some of this basic analysis in this video using built-in Excel features. Okay, so the analysis on the revenue growth, I'll have to move on to the right side of the screen or model, is conducted by referencing the three key financial variables one by one from the one-way data table. Okay, so we click under total assets and then reference the total asset cell, G26 apparently. Then we move to net income and do the same. Okay, as well as long-term debt, which I believe is right here. Okay, so then what we do is we highlight the entire data table. Okay, which starts with this blank cell in top left corner, includes all the reference cells in the model, as well as the growth range for the revenue from as low as 5% through the baseline of 10 all the way to 15. Okay, so then we go to the data tab, what if analysis, in the data table, and in the column input cell, because the table is oriented vertically, we click on the revenue growth rate. Okay, and click OK. So that will give us the what if analysis for each one of these revenue growth rates and the impact on the 2030 projections for the three key financial variables. Okay, so by looking at the chart that I had sort of built in here, okay, we can, based on this one-way data table, we can see that the largest effect, at least on a relative basis, appears to be on the net income that starts with a loss, right, of about 3,000, and then going all the way to a profit of about 200,000. So we can see that the total asset base changes from about 4.6 to 5.2 million, and then the debt declines from about 2.8 to 2.6. So it has sort of is relatively stable, so to speak. Okay, again, without going much into finance, the slow growth rate, right, at the lower end of these ranges, 5, 6, 7%, would not drive sales high enough to generate enough net income to support the planned expansion from retained earnings. So the debt would end up being higher than it would have been if the sales grew at a higher pace towards the bottom of the range here. Okay. Mitigating this effect is a slower buildup in total asset base at a lower growth rate, right? But due to the relatively fast pace of capital expansion in plant and equipment, the total asset would expand significantly from the current level of 3 million, which explains a significant debt increase from the current level of 1.2 million into that, 2.6, 2.7, 2.8 million range as shown here. Okay. All right, so far we examined the impact on a single, albeit the most important parameter or driver, the revenue growth on our three financial variables, net income, total assets, and long-term debt in 2030. Okay, we now expand this analysis by examining the impact of possible cost savings by creating three cost of goods sold scenarios with a high cost savings when the percentage would be about 77% of the revenue, mid cost savings of 80%, and no cost savings, or no additional cost savings, I should say, which is the current 83%. Okay, so in addition to that, we will slow down the pace of capital expansion. Okay, by keeping investment constant for the first 3 years, these three at 500,000, and then increasing to 550 in 2029 and 600,000 in 2030. Finally, we want to consider we don't want to forget our revenue growth parameter, right? We want to consider three revenue growth scenarios: the low growth of 5%, baseline of 10 that we currently have, and the 15% high growth. We can combine these scenarios in all sorts of ways, but let us try to come up with three overall cases: worst case, base case, and best case. Okay, since capital expansion here is a decision, we will consider both current expansion plans, that just like this, okay, and that slower version I just explained in each of the three cases. And this will result in the six scenarios overall. Number one, okay, no cost savings, 83%, and slower revenue growth of 5%, okay, with both fast and slow capital expansion. So that's sort of a worst case scenario, okay. Then mid cost savings of about 80%, and baseline revenue growth of 10% with both expansion scenarios. That's sort of the baseline case or mid case. Okay, and the third, number three, high cost savings, right? High cost savings of 77%, with high revenue growth of 15%. That's clearly the best case scenario with both types of both scenarios for capital expansion. Okay, so Excel has a built-in tool that is sort of suited for this type of what-if analysis, and it's called a scenario manager. Okay, so go to see it, go to Data tab again, What If Analysis, and the Scenario Manager. Okay, we'll click Add to add the first scenario. Okay, and we're going to call it pessimistic slow dash slow. So pessimistic dash slow. Okay, and the changing cells are going to be the revenue, cost of goods sold. Okay, then type a comma and select 2027 through 2030 capital expansion cells. Okay, leaving the 2026 unselected, I suppose, because it's going to remain 500,000, in any of these scenarios. Okay, then click the OK to get to the next screen. So the values currently in these text boxes are just retrieved from these cells, right? And there's one hidden at the bottom we don't want to forget, right? In other words, pay attention to the vertical scroll bar, right? Okay, so for the pessimistic slow scenario, we'll change revenue growth from 10% to 5 by typing in 0.05. Okay, we'll leave the cost of goods sold at 83, and then change the expansion for 2027 to 500, 2028 to 500. Okay, and then for 2029 we'll have 550, and then we'll have 600 for 2030. Okay, so again, 5%, 83% for revenue growth and cost of goods sold, and then for the four capital expansion cells from 27 to 30, we'll have 500,000, 500,000, 550, and 600, and click OK. And this is going to save our pessimistic slow scenario. To that one, we will add then pessimistic dash fast. Okay. Notice that the changing cells are remembered, so you only have to click OK. The fast scenario assumes the current expansion rate, so we don't have to change any of these cells. What we do have to change is the 0.05 for the sales growth, leaving the 83% for the cost of goods sold. So click OK on that one. Add the next set of scenarios, which is baseline dash slow. Okay, so the baseline will be 10% revenue growth, okay, including the 80% cost of goods sold percentage. For the slow, again, we have to change 2027 to 500, 2028 to 500, 2029 to 550, and 2030 to 600. Okay, as we did in a pessimistic slow, scenario. Okay, baseline fast, okay, is 10%, 80%, and then the fast capital expansion means we don't need to change any of the values here. The last two scenarios are optimistic slow and optimistic fast. For optimistic slow, we have 15% optimistic revenue growth rate, and we have the optimistic cost savings that will change it from the current 83 down to 77, so that's a 6% decrease, which is obviously significant. For the slow capital expansion, we have 500, 500, 550, and 600 as we had for the pessimistic slow and baseline slow. And finally, for optimistic dash fast, we have 15%, 77%, and then we leave the expansion as it is. Okay, which gives us all six input scenarios, right? The first two of which are sort of worst case, baseline, and then the best case or optimistic. Okay, after all these scenarios have been entered as they have, click on the summary button. Okay, delete whatever it's in the result cells, and then click on net income, comma, total asset, comma, and total long-term debt for 2030. All right, once you click OK, this will run the scenario manager and generate a separate tab called scenario summary, where we will delete the current values because we are not interested in that particular scenario. We just want to see these six. We're going to clean up a little bit around the table, and then we'll expand column B to replace the changing cells addresses with the more meaningful English-like descriptions which come from the model by copy pasting, right? So we got revenue growth, cost of goods sold, right? So we got the revenue growth and cost of goods sold, copy, paste special values. Then we have the plant and equipment additions, copy, paste special values, and then we'll enter, I guess, 2027. Let's see if I can copy this down, right, to 2030. And then instead of for the resultant cells, we'll have net income for 2030, right? Net income 2030, and then we'll have total assets for 2030. Total assets for 2030. You can just type that in if you think that that's faster. And finally, the projected long-term debt for, I don't want to cut it, I want to just copy and paste special values at 2030. Okay, so we're going to finish by creating an appropriate chart that is going to summarize the three key financial variables here at the bottom, right? Okay, net income should be on a separate axis. The way I typically do it, I highlight, starting with this blank purple cell, all the scenarios names, then control key, and then all the outcomes, insert. I start with a column chart, right? And I move it down. Okay, and it's hard to have this prepared because this sheet is auto-generated. I put the legend at the bottom. Okay, and then I look at the net income, which is the blue line, and I change the series type to line, and then I put it on the format data series on the secondary axis. And then, you clearly have to label the chart a little better by adding the chart title. Okay, something like financial analysis. Okay, I typically reduce the size, and then labeling the axis, primarily vertical axis, rotated. So those are the total assets and LTD for long-term debt, and then secondary vertical axis is net income. Okay, and we can maybe call this financial analysis projections 2030 or something like that. Okay. All right. So we'll save those changes. Again, without going too much into finance, as this is not a finance class, right? But we can comment on the slow, right? These three, right? The slow expansion scenarios have a higher net income, which is interesting here. See, compared to their fast counterparts, right? Um, and lower debt projections as well. Okay, in terms of the asset buildup, of course, the fast scenarios, right? Looking at the asset buildup, right? The fast scenarios are more dominant, right? Comparably, right? Because the higher growth rates contribute to the higher buildup in the asset base, but it has at the expense of the comparably lower net income and also higher debt at the same time. Okay, so this is a good point to stop the video on sort of a use of these basic Excel what if analysis tools. Um, and the next one is going to use the analytics solver platform to do similar types of analysis and projections.